We're in the BI Platform studio, and I'm having a remote video interview with Lawrence Corr, founder of Decision One Consulting, from his office in Leeds in this case. Lawrence, you spoke at our conference in this session on remote data model storming. Business stakeholders often find it challenging to switch from a process-oriented to a data-oriented view. How does your BEAM methodology address this challenge?
Good question, Werner. BEAM is a very process-orientated way of looking at data. So it addresses it head-on, shall we say. Why it does that is because it is behind the scenes dimensional, and dimensional modeling has always been very process activity orientated because it's modeling to do with measurement, and the only thing you can measure is activity. I think more general forms of data modeling classify activity and description at the same level, if you like. You know, everything is data, whether it's you or I would describe it as a noun or an adjective describing the noun, or verb, which is activity. It's all just data. However, BEAM stands for Business Event Analysis and Modeling. It's event orientated, which is activity orientated, which is process orientated. So it really focuses on that. And yeah, exactly as you say, business stakeholders find it difficult to move away from the process orientated picture of the world, because they're quite good at asking for requirements from applications, what the application does, the activity that they want to perform with the application. When we start talking about, oh, let's just do data modeling and find out all the data you want, that absence of process and activity, of narrative flow, is the thing that flummoxes them, if you like. They don't always know what they want to do with the data eventually. They've got the ideas of what they might do with it fairly soon, I suppose, but the big picture of what they'll get from the data is out there until they get the data. What they know about now is how the data is captured, what activity they go through that's very important for the business on a day-to-day basis. If we use that process flow to capture the data, and tell the story of the data, it's a much more natural way of discovering it and prioritizing it. You know, what's the most important data comes from the most important business processes. Where does the big, sources of data, volatile sources of data come from? The very frequent, detailed activity that the business does. So traditional data modeling, in the absence of that, is hard to do, but process orientated, it's the strength of the BEAM approach.
Yeah. Okay, now we've had 2 very hectic and remote years of working, and after 2 years of online remote data modeling training and sessions, what have your experiences been?
Generally very good ones. Something I wasn't looking forward to, well, no one was predicting. Over many years I've been asked about how we could do some of this work remotely, particularly by my American clients, who are, of course, are spread across the United States and can't always get together. Now we've all experienced that because of the pandemic. My experience is that we're adaptable. People learn very quickly how to get on with remote working and using video meeting platforms, something that I think we all shied away from to start with. And I certainly didn't want to do remote training and remote consulting sessions if I could help it in the past. But my experience is we all learned to be better at using these platforms, to turn our cameras on, to understand whether we've got a mute on, etc. And and perform our jobs and have meetings remotely. So if we could just do that basic stuff, then we could start to become a little more ambitious and use these platforms to learn new skills and to learn about the data within our organizations, to start moving it to the next level beyond just sort of basic meetings. Yeah. So I was very fortunate. Companies trained themselves to use the platforms, and then I could add my techniques on top of those, without the equivalent of having to teach people to read and write. We became very familiar with using these platforms. And my experience was that it was a lot more fun and a lot more productive than I thought it would be. And that there were techniques that we could carry on using afterwards that would help us to gather more information. We all wanted to get back in the office, and it would be better to do some of this work face to face again. But we know that that's probably never going to be entirely the same. So we can leverage these techniques. It's certainly been a learning curve for us all, but we've all come away with some extra useful skills, to say the least.
And what, in your opinion, have been the biggest challenges, online versus offline data modeling sessions?
What you might call non-verbal or non-visual communication. I don't know quite the right phrase. When it's a small group of people and you've got good camera access and everyone's engaged, you might be able to see and hear what everyone's thinking. With a larger group, that's a lot more challenging. You might see the head and shoulders, but you don't see what's going on out of frame. Body language perhaps is missing. So trying to pick up on some of the non-verbal communication is a little trickier. Again, I think we've all got better webcams on our laptops than we had a few years ago. So certainly more high definition video helps tremendously there. And yes, improving sound quality, but keeping everybody engaged. I'm familiar with working with quite large teams and running large modeling sessions from time to time, and certainly large training courses. Definitely can't do the same size remotely. Doesn't matter how many images you can have on the screen. There's the two of us, so we're quite clear when people look back on this interview. But when it starts to get to the certainly above 8, certainly maybe 16 is the next sort of breaking point, where we can have a decent sized grid of people and see that everyone is sort of engaged. So you definitely have to think about smaller groups, certainly.
And which aspects, if any, do you think will remain for future projects? What are the key takeaways?
Well, I think, honestly, all aspects of what we've learned to do remotely will remain. It won't be the 100% of the way we do it now that most of us are back in the office. But hardly any of us are back in the office full time when there is option to work flexibly. So we're going to take advantage of many of these features. If we can start off modeling back face to face, I think that's the very best way to do it, and the quickest start to any project or any new data modeling. But yeah, if we can't get everyone in that meeting, if some people that's their day or their week to work remotely, we're going to have to take advantage of maybe a hybrid approach. Even if we can get everyone in the room for a modeling session, there is a limited amount of time. We don't want to carry on any longer than it needs to. But there is what can you pick up in that session? Now we can think about recording the session, I suppose, as we're doing with this interview, but also if we're using visual platforms, as my talk was all about, if we're using that to record what we're doing, even when we're in the room, okay, we might actually use physical Post-it notes because they're more fluid when we are in the room. But if we digitize things and we more permanently record them on visual collaboration platforms, we can all come back and look at it shortly afterwards or days afterwards. We don't all have to be working synchronously. We can work asynchronously. Those that couldn't make the meeting have somewhere to go to see what we've done and add their contributions afterwards. We can all adjust our thoughts a little more easily. And when we come back, we've got that digital version to start from. Yeah, it's going to be a much more hybrid approach. If we can have all the strengths of what we had before, that's great, but also the ability to work asynchronously afterwards.
Yeah. And at the start of the pandemic, you had a look at different platforms, different visualization platforms. What are the key differentiators of the online visualization platforms that you used for data model storming?
Right. Well, not that many anymore. There was when I first started. There was definitely strong leaders in terms of functionality. But I must admit, in the last year or so, I've found it hard to keep up with the new features that each platform is adding. They're very similar. The big differentiators I think that our clients would be careful to look at is security, scalability, those important things. Where is your data being held, etc., and how well is that platform performing in the market? Obviously, there is going to be some shrinkage there. Not every platform can continue. There'll be some perhaps mergers and acquisitions. Who's going to buy these platforms eventually? And I think the important thing is when there's a certain amount of commonality in features, it is what you're looking for is ease of use and the fact that your colleagues know these platforms, picking a standard. So I don't think companies should be worried about which platform they use beyond the sort of security aspects of it and market resilience. The features are very similar, but they should certainly be looking at what they find easier to use and has become the corporate standard. When I first started, I was part of my training was to teach people how to use these platforms. Increasingly now, they've used one or two of them before. Not always the one that I've chosen for, say, a particular modeling session or training course, but they are familiar with those platforms, and the experience knowledge they have is quite transferable. So yeah, it's just like picking up a different pen, a different marker, a slightly different size, color and color of Post-it notes, etc. But the idiom is the same across so many of these platforms, which is great, and it helps us to work in this way. Okay.
Well, thank you very much for the interview, Lawrence, and looking forward to meeting in person, that is, again.
Always a pleasure, Werner. Thank you.